What's up, gang? We're back to finish this list. Our editor wants to apologize about the problems he has had the past few months.
And I also want to say that we love the appreciation and support you people have provided. It has been surprising, very humbling to see people enjoy these videos as much as our editor enjoys making them.
What have you boys been up to these past few months? I've been addicted to Persona 3 Reloaded. Such a wonderful game to see get such a glow up like that.
I've been playing Helldivers 2 and spreading liberty and democracy across the galaxy. I've helped many fine compatriots on suicidal missions to repel the bug and robot swarms that want to disturb our way of life.
I've been sharpening my brain with Unicorn Overlord. It's an amazing tactical RPG with so many great characters. If you like Fire Emblem or Final Fantasy tactics, this is a game right up your alley.
You definitely need all the help you can get, Sleepy Joe. I'm going to win this election and leave you in the dust.
Let's leave the politics behind, gentlemen, and get to what we are here for. Now, I have a feeling I'm not the only one with this thought, but should we just skip over X7? We all know it's pretty trash.
Is that even a question, Barry? It's hard to look at this game, especially with how they treated my boy Zero.
Even I can't stand up for this game. Their idea of freshening up the series backfired tremendously. The gameplay is without a doubt the worst that I've ever played.
The only thing I can say positively about it is the new character, Axel. He is a prototype for a new line of Reploids that are capable of perfectly copying another Reploid's DNA data. And that's about all we know about him. He was found by Red, who leads a group called Red Alert. They're a vigilante group like the Maverick Hunters that decided to take matters in their own hands.
Axel notices that Red Alert is acting strange, going after more innocent Reploids instead of Mavericks. Axel decides to leave the group and join the Hunters as a way to atone for some of his deeds.
Yeah, we all know Sigma is behind everything. The voice acting is pure garbage. X sounds like a little bitch boy, Zero sounds like he is voiced by an AI, and Axel sounds way too childish throughout the whole thing. The gameplay tries to be innovative by being 3D, but you feel like you're walking through molasses the whole time while also fighting the camera the entire time. The faster we move on, the better for my sanity.
I'm definitely ready to move on.
Excellent. I knew I could count on you all. Now we are finally at Mega Man X8. With the Maverick Wars continuing with no means of stopping anytime soon, humans have taken to migrating to the moon with an orbital elevator called the Jacob Project.
An accident occurs with a pod launching itself off of the elevator, crashing into the ground. X is sent to investigate the wreckage and help with survivors. That's when he finds Sigma crawling out of the wreckage.
Not just Sigma, but a whole army of them leave the burning wreckage. X is definitely rattled, but takes up a fighting stance as always. They suddenly clear the way for this small twink of a Reploid that introduces himself as Lumine.
Lumine is the director of the Jacob Project, and he also talks about how these new generation Reploids have the ability to DNA copy any Reploid they want. They also can't be afflicted by the Maverick virus, so there is no risk with turning into such a character like Sigma.
As we get further into this game, we will see what that kind of information implies. These Reploids are not evil because of a simple virus that makes them do evil things. These are uncorrupt Reploids that choose of their own free will to commit the things they do. It does bring up interesting questions, and also brings into question if the Maverick Hunters are truly in the right for defeating these Reploids, because they are not technically Mavericks.
We move to unusual Maverick readings around the Galapagos. My sweet, beautiful Alia dispatches us to go investigate the readings. I also want to say the voice acting is the best it has ever been. Everyone sounds as they should, instead of sounding like shit in previous games. Lucas Gilbertson makes Zero sound cool and confident instead of like a whiny bitch in X4.
Mark Gatha also does a tremendous job voicing X. You can hear his empathy and caring demeanor as X normally has, but can also sound aggressive and protective when the scene calls for it. Jeffrey Watson also does good work for Axel too. In general though, all the voice actors here do some good work.
It's a shame Lucas and Mark don't do voice acting anymore from what I remember. Anyways, let's not get too far off track here. Just like in X7, you play as two different characters in a stage and can swap back and forth between them as you need. Axel has seen the biggest changes in gameplay, now having a rapid fire that can be aimed in multiple directions just like base in the classic series.
And my boy Zero is actually fun to play again. His dash is shorter than all the other characters, but he can double jump to make up for that shortcoming. Now that I think about it, all characters can now air dash from the start, and that opens up level designing possibilities that couldn't be fully used before. Also, some enemies have shields that block all damage. Luckily, breaking shields is a new thing here. X can use a charge shot to break them, Zero has to use his uppercut slash, and Axel just has to shoot them a bunch of times. It's small, but it does change up your approach to combat just enough for me to be okay with it.
I definitely agree there. As we move along, we also learn that team swapping can be used to break free of a grapple an enemy might have, giving the mechanic even more utility than before. You can also do an all-out attack that basically acts like a screen nuke, but it still deals heavy damage to what isn't killed outright.
It really makes them feel like a team with all of these team mechanics when they always seem to work solo before. We get to the end of the stage and Vile shows up again, causing havoc as usual. We haven't seen him since X3, and I'm not gonna lie, I almost forgot about him.
Vile shows them that his group have kidnapped Lumine, therefore taking control of the entire Jacob project. We return to base to find that there are new Mavericks to take down. We have Earthrock Trilobite, Gigabolt Man O-War, Avalanche Yeti, Burn Rooster, Bamboo Pandemonium, Optic Sunflower, Dark Mantis, and Gravity and Tunyon.
We also get introduced to two new characters, navigators named Layer and Pallet. Along with Alia, they provide support for the player if wanted. Alia is our generic navigator that can help with a little of everything. Layer is more specialized about boss encounters and can provide info about weaknesses. Pallet is specialized in route analysis, helping you find secret items or power-ups. She also helps you make new upgrades with the metal you collect. Oh right, metals are basically like coins in Super Mario Bros. You use them to make upgrades for your characters and even unlock upgrades to make if they're the rare metals.
X has two armors he can find in this game. However, this game approaches it differently. You find an upgrade and you get the neutral armor. This is a template for equipping the armor upgrades you find in the stages. One set is called the Hermes armor and the other is called the Icarus armor.
And personally, I find the Hermes armor to be the best looking set in the series. I love the whole aesthetic of it. This armor's focus is about speed, much like the messenger of the gods himself. He can dash through enemy projectiles, charge his shots faster, the charged shot turns into a 3-projectile spread, and has overall better moving speed. The Giga ability, X-Drive, enhances all of these abilities for a time.
Of course you'd use the armor that helps you run away from fights like a bitch. The Icarus armor is a true man's armor. You can jump just as high as 0 with a second jump, you take less damage. Your third charge becomes a laser beam that annihilates what's in front of you. And even your jumps can deal damage to enemies. You also have a Giga ability, Giga Crash, if you have the whole set, which will wipe the screen of all enemies.
Shut up, you orange fuck. I don't run away from fights with this armor.
Good grief, we can't have a day where you guys don't fight. Don't forget that you can mix and match these pieces of armor to your liking to cater your playstyle. For that, this armor is incredibly solid. There is also an ultimate armor that combines the best of both armors, but that needs a code to unlock it for gameplay, so I don't really want to count it too much. We eventually have to make our way up the elevator to get to the moon to confront Sigma for the 8th goddamn time. How many times do we need to teach you this lesson, old man?
I'm always game to have a free punching bag. I'll put him in the dirt as many times as I need to.
We deal with Sigma and it's all over, or so we think. In the plot twist to end all plot twists, Sigma was being used by Lumine the whole time. Lumine shows up and congratulates the hunters for taking down Sigma, claiming the plan is going along smoothly.
It turns out Lumine was wanting Sigma's DNA this whole time to further along the next step of evolution for Reploids. He also wants to annihilate all humans and obsolete Reploids to help facilitate that next step in evolution. Basic, yes, but a twist like this in an X game is one I'll gladly accept as long as Sigma isn't the villain again.
The fight with Lumine is cool, though. He copies the abilities of all the bosses you fought to get here, showing off the DNA copying ability of the new generation. Once the first phase is over, he transforms into basically an angel. I'm sure you people are intelligent to have seen the parallels with the Bible here. Noah's Park, also known as Noah's Ark, the Jacob Project, also known as Jacob's Ladder, and one of Lumine's attacks is called Paradise Lost.
Subtlety is an art form, I suppose. Still, though, I'm not really against the themes this game has.
We defeat Lumine, and he kneels in a position, cracks appearing all over his body. Axel approaches his body I'm assuming to make sure he is dead, but this shadow-like tendril shoots out of his body and hits Axel in his head gem. He passes out while X and Zero finish the job. Axel seems okay and will be just fine, but the theory is that Lumine probably passed himself onto Axel with that tendril.
I guess we won't know for sure until the next game. They've been in that elevator for close to 20 years now, I guess.
Granted, in the end, the bosses we fight along with Lumine are now sort of like Sigma now. They may not be technically Mavericks, but since they have a little bit of Maverick DNA inside of them, what does that mean exactly? Are these Reploids more human than robot? Humans have the capacity for good and evil in Reploids.
I'm going to stop you right there, Obama. I don't think this sort of discussion is appropriate for this particular video. Besides, I personally don't really care about that sort of philosophy.
Fair enough, I guess. Anyways, that's the story of X8. Personally, I like it a lot. It's a step up compared to some of the other games. The fact I think about these details has to mean something, right? If I were to rank this game, I'd go with an A tier on this game. It provided some good quality of life changes for the formula and has an interesting story.
I wouldn't go that far, Barry. This game is fun to play, don't get me wrong, but some of these levels are straight trash. Who are you going to find that will say Central, White, and Dynasty are their favorite levels?
Don't forget about Pandemonium's level. One where you can bring a ride armor with you throughout the whole stage as a means of finding all the power-ups if you're able to keep it alive as you explore it. There's also Gravity Antonion's stage that has fun gravity mechanics that has clever secrets to find.
True enough, but there is also Burn Rooster's stage that is a slow auto-scroller going down the reactor, and then a slow auto-scroller going back up. Sure, the middle is a cool part, but it's not enough to make up for it.
Dark Mantis's stage is a very interesting stage, and it is one I'd love to see explored more as a mechanic if we ever get more X games. You have to stay out of security beams and spotlights, or else a swarm of enemies will show up to impede your progress. Axel can also use the plasma gun to give power to a generator that unlocks 2 rare metals.
It's not much of a punishment if you're ever caught, though. It doesn't stop you from getting a power-up or something. It's a cool mechanic, but it isn't utilized well. Don't forget Trilobite stage, where you run away from a big mechanoid, smash a crane in its face, then chase it back the same way you came. It leaves a lot to be desired, in my correct opinion.
Troya Base is a nice love letter to Cyber Peacock stage from X4, and that stage is your favorite stage in that game.
Well, sure, it's my favorite, because Cyber Peacock stage required good platforming and dodging of obstacles from the player to get a good rank to get the rewards out of it. Troya Base is just spin to win a 0 to get all the good stuff. It's not challenging one bit.
Fine, I get it. Not every stage is a hit in this game, but I still like this game considering all of that, kind of like how X3 is Joe's favorite game in the series.
Is X8 your favorite game in the series, Barry?
I suppose not when I compare it to the other games that isn't X7, but I still like this game all the same.
I want to add to the criticism here by talking about the music. It does sound good with the electric guitar sounds they chose, but there isn't much variety in the instrumentation. They all kind of blend into each other, if that makes sense. The other games had amazing soundtracks because of the other various instruments that brought variety to their respective soundtracks. Look, Barry, I know you like this game, but I don't see this as being A tier. I'm with Donnie on this one by saying it's B tier.
All right, fellas, I know when I'm outnumbered. Especially when considering the weapons they all can get on top of everything else. I guess this isn't an A tier worthy game. I can live with a B tier at the end of the day. And we are finally at Mega Man X Command Mission, the first RPG in the series. On the timeline, it takes place 100 years or so after the mainline X series, and even then it's considered to be in an alternate timeline anyways. The story takes place in the 23rd century. The discovery of a new substance called force metal has revolutionized the field of Reploid engineering. An artificial island called Giga City is created that is designed for mining and smelting force metal. And it eventually gets attacked by a group of Reploids led by a character named Epsilon.
For some reason, Giga City reminds me of a place in Japan called Hashima Island. It was an island solely for mining coal in the Second World War, sort of like how Giga City is for force metal.
Joe, save your history lesson for someone that cares.
Don't worry, Joe, I appreciate your history lesson. However, let's stay on topic here. Giga City is raided by Epsilon. An X-Zero and a new character named Shadow are sent out to repel this maverick attack. Shadow betrays them, with Epsilon summoning an elite squad to blast Zero into the stratosphere, with X having to escape because 1 against 5 isn't exactly great odds.
They really did yeet my boy Zero. If he wasn't taken by surprise like that, he would have taken those 5 Mavericks easy.
X suddenly wakes up in a place called New Hope, the home base for a resistance group that fights against the rebellion, the group that is led by Epsilon. That's totally not going to confuse anyone, having a resistance and a rebellion.
And then the game just turns into the same thing chapter after chapter. Go to a place, walk and dash down boring hallways, find a new party member, beat a boss, and go back to Central Tower. I'm not much of an RPG sort of guy like these two myself, and I felt that this story was just really boring. Maybe it's just me, but I wasn't really fascinated by any of it, except for maybe the combat.
Honestly, Donald, you're not that far off from how I at least think of it. I'll give credit for Capcom attempting something new for the series, but I don't think this game really lands on what it tried to do. It's not a terrible game, but once you get like 4 chapters in, you've seen everything it can offer. Characters don't really get much in the development area outside of Massimo, and even then it's pretty basic stuff. He wears the armor of his master and is racked with doubt about being worthy of it. He does get over that self-doubt and steps up, but that's about it.
Then you have Marino, who is basically a Robin Hood type of character, stealing information and other important data and releasing it to the public, not expecting any compensation. My favorite character in this game, Cinnamon, is just a young and naive Reploid that has a force metal generator built into her and is being held captive by one of the bosses. After we rescue her and she joins the crew, her narrative importance is all done and just becomes a healer in battle or someone to go to make new force metals.
Of course, you would like the youngest Reploid in this game. You need better taste in women, Sleepy Joe. Marino is such a babe that can't be denied. She helps enrich the lives of the general public without expecting anything in return. Tell me that isn't attractive, you guys.
I'm going to interrupt this topic before I throw you both in horny jail.
And what did I do, Barry? I haven't said anything remotely inappropriate about Cinnamon.
Considering the reason you have for liking her, I'd rather you not talk about it any more than necessary, Joey. So anyways, just about each chapter ends with a fight against a member of Epsilon's crew. Wild Django, Silverhorn, Dr. Psyche, Mach Gentra, Shadow, Incentes, Bodos Ferrum, and then eventually Epsilon himself.
Spider even sacrifices himself like a bro to help the cause of stopping the rebellion once and for all.
At the end of the story, it's revealed that your party member Spider never died at all in that sacrificial move. He attacks the party and is revealed to be your commanding officer, Colonel Redips. You'll never guess the reason why he is going through with all of these actions. Just kidding, it's for furthering the evolution of Reploids. Sigma might not be mentioned by name at all whatsoever in this game, but his goddamn motivation can never leave this series, can it?
Another game with a different antagonist that isn't Sigma, but it's just boring. When it comes to an RPG, this is something you never want to do. A boring story should never be in an RPG, and that includes having boring characters too. You'd think Redips being able to copy a Reploid like Axel can could mean learning about these new generation Reploids, but it goes absolutely nowhere. It's just a surprise moment in the story and nothing more. We never learn about Epsilon's lackeys and about why they choose to follow him or Redips. Ferrum does betray him during one moment, and it seems to be because of one small cutscene where she is mistreated, but it just doesn't feel enough to justify the action. It's not a continuous thing you see throughout the story, it's just one moment.
And then we save the day as usual, and that's the game. This isn't winning awards for story or anything like that, and definitely not one to play if you're trying to get into the RPG genre. I'll admit some of the characters introduced are cool, but the fact that we don't learn much of anything about them is such a disappointment.
Me and Barry can introduce you to some good RPG games sometime if you're still interested in exploring the genre, Donald.
I might take you up on that offer, Joe. Anyways, let's talk about the battle system of this game. It's at least fun to play with. You can only have 3 characters in a fight, each with their own unique skills and specialties. At the start of their turn, characters get 25% on their weapon energy by default. This meter can be used for special character actions or for using a sub-weapon, which you can have 2 of at any given time. They don't take up your turn if you use them, but do take weapon meter to use them. They provide some interesting strategies to use for battle, such as elemental attacks to exploit weaknesses, forcing enemies to target one character, generating weapon energy, and more.
You also have force metals that kind of act like armor in this game. They can provide buffs like extra hit points, protection against elemental attacks, gaining more power and weapon energy, and a lot more. You can only equip so many before going over a value of what's called immunity, which increases as you level up. It can give you severe stat decreases if you do go over this number, but fortunately it's easy to not do this, and you shouldn't really suffer adverse effects unless you do this on purpose. It reminds me of the bugs you can get in the Battle Network series if you set up your programs incorrectly.
Also, all the characters have what's called hyper mode. You can only use it once per battle, and it gives the characters a major buff to their stats, and sometimes provides a unique perk. But the kicker is that it's only available for so many turns before it goes away. If you do run all the turns to 0 for a hyper mode, it doesn't come back unless you use a gain hyper item, level up, or get a full recovery. X has an exclusive armor called Crossfire for his hyper mode, and has better single target attacking capabilities. Zero has his standard black armor upgrade and can sometimes counter enemies when he gets attacked. Marino's Quicksilver gives her so much goddamn speed that she will have multiple turns in a row. Both Spider and Axel have the same hyper mode, basically turning invisible and not being affected by anything. That also includes buffs from your allies too.
And last but not least, Cinnamon's Iron Maiden can buff everyone's weapon energy at the start of their turns.
Everyone also has an action trigger attack, utilizing unique inputs to carry out attacks, unique to each character. X having a charge shot, Zero using commands like in a fighting game to attack, Spider playing poker, and Axel going down a line of commands to use an attack from an enemy you've fought.
Axel's is very cool and provides flavor for who he is, but this could have just been a simple list of attacks you can choose from instead of this convoluted process. Basically make it like a blue mage from Final Fantasy.
X and Zero also have secret hyper mode armors that can be found in the post-game content. X has an ultimate armor that makes him an armory. He has giant guns for arms and can fire a beam out of his chest with an action trigger that unloads all of it in a blaze of glory. Zero gets an armor called Absolute Zero, gaining wings and purple, detailing on the armor. His hands become rated E for everyone, along with his action trigger needing inputs to deal crazy damage to one target.
This armor looks so much like bass when he merges with treble. I love that little callback.
Speaking of battles, one thing I hate about them is that the enemies are programmed to make sound effects if they're hopping or if they're flying. I pray for your ears and sanity if you have multiple enemies that do either of those things as their idle animation.
God, this made me want to off myself so hard. How did this get past their quality assurance testing?
I also have an issue with some character designs. To be specific, I mean Zero and Axel's designs because they look the exact same. Otherwise, all the new characters look good. X got a character redesign for this game, and it looks phenomenal. The white trimming and gold details help him stand out, and the energy scarf thing is just plain cool. Meanwhile, Zero and Axel don't look any different from their X counterparts. It's almost distracting in that way.
Normally, I'd say you can't fix perfection when it comes to Zero's design, but I'm conflicted. His base design has always stood out as a great look, but even the smallest touch-up would go a long way to show the length of time between this game and the other mainline games. No doubt he would have gotten upgrades to his body within that span of time.
I agree with that sentiment. It almost feels lazy to not redesign Zero and Axel. I did read an interview that they changed XS look because he would often be the most boring looking character on the screen, and I can definitely understand that. I wish I could talk more about this game, but it simply doesn't provide enough things to talk about in general. If you guys don't have anything more to add, I'd like to drop this in C tier.
I don't think I have anything else to add too. It's mostly just a mid-game outside of armors and some characters. You don't need to play this game if you don't feel the desire for it. C tier for me too.
There we go, boys. We are finally done. I'd say we have quite a solid list here, everyone.
Hold up, Barry. I have a proposition for you two. How about we do a service for the people by looking at a few more games? This video seems too short for the long wait our people have had to deal with.
I don't mind if you guys don't mind.
I'd be more than happy to serve our people once more, but our editor doesn't have any footage for these games, you know?
He will get over it. He did drag his feet making this third part.
Donald, stop being mean to our editor. Life gets in the way sometimes. Anyways, what games did you want to look at?
For now, let's look at the two games on the Game Boy Color, Mega Man Extreme 1 and 2.
I almost forget about these two games. I remember having fun with them at the time, but I haven't really played them since those days. I remember the first one having bosses from X1 and X2, while the second game had bosses from X2 and X3.
Seems like that brain sharpening is working for you, Joe. I figure we could do both at the same time because of how similar they are. Extreme 1 has a normal and hard mode, but don't let this confuse you. Normal mode has 4 bosses with Chill Penguin, Spark Mandrill, Storm Eagle, and Flame Stag. Once you beat normal mode, you can carry everything you got over to hard mode, where you fight against Wheel Gator, Magda Centipede, Armored Armadillo, and Morph Moth. Once you beat hard mode, extreme mode unlocks, which is just a standard Mega Man X game at that point.
The story is that the mother computer at Hunter Base is being hacked, and X has to go into cyberspace to stop the chaos being caused around the world by said hacking. Data from previous rebellions is being used to resurrect bosses from older games. You have a new character, Mitty, as an assistant for your missions. As you beat these bosses, we learn that Mitty's brother, Techno, along with 2 antagonists, are the ones responsible for hacking the mother computer, Gimel and Zane.
I do recall a moment where you have to kill Techno because he was influenced by Sigma, and since he and Mitty share the same CPU, Mitty ends up dying as well. I don't really remember feeling any emotion about that moment when it happened. Kind of felt contrived, I guess?
I think I know what you're getting at, Joe. At the end of the extreme mode, you fight Sigma and defeat him and save the day as usual. Honestly, this first extreme game isn't all that great. It's just a diluted Mega Man X game, and since we can play those games on the go in this day and age, this game doesn't really have a lot of positive traits left anymore. The soundtrack is a fun listen if you like this style of music, though.
The soundtrack does sound pretty good considering the limitations. Overall, I agree with you, Donnie. It's not that this game is terrible, but it's more like, why play this when you have better games in the series to play instead? The story here doesn't really carry over in any capacity in the other mainline games.
And next we have Extreme 2. This game is mostly the same as far as its structure goes, but you can play as Zero in this game, unlike in the first one, so it's much better from that alone.
I think this game's story had to do with all the Reploids on an island collapsing due to something taking away their soul or something. X and Zero are sent to this island to investigate why this is happening.
Mostly spot on, Joe. Something is taking away the Reploids' DNA soul and leaves them as empty husks. No personality or memories.
This game is also the first canonical appearance of Iris, acting as an assistant for X and Zero as they investigate. I kind of wish this game did give some details about how Iris and Zero became a couple, but it never happens.
Like I said, Obama, Zero is such an alpha Chad that he just attracts all the ladies.
Whatever, man. Wait, did you just call me Obama?
So anyways, one mode of this game lets you play as X and fight against Neon Tiger, launch Octopus, Volt Catfish, and Flame Mammoth. Another lets you play as Zero and he fights against Overdrive Ostrich, Tunnel Rhino, Wire Sponge, and Blast Hornet. After you clear those two, you unlock a third mode where you can use both X and Zero fighting against all 8 bosses, being able to swap between the two whenever you want. Heart tanks only apply to which character gets it, and this actually applies to bosses for their weapons too.
So I'm going to go ahead and say it. These two games should have had the game mode where you fight against all 8 bosses unlocked at the very start. Having the bosses split apart in this manner is just stupid and provides no real content. It's just padding for gameplay purposes.
This was an interesting idea to commit to back in the day these games came out. It made this on-the-go game at least feel substantial at the time. However, it hasn't aged well at all because, like you said, it feels like padding. Nothing much is different outside of the final boss of both games, Sigma. The first Extreme game was pretty boring in hindsight, but Extreme 2 had more substance to the story, especially with the two main antagonists, Gareth and Burkana.
I remember these two the most of all. They were designed as a knight and a witch, and they look really good, especially Burkana. It's rare to find female characters in this series, let alone one that's an antagonist.
It's a shame that all Burkana was doing in general was harvesting these souls to see how much stronger she could get using them for herself. And even then, of course, it was Sigma that had to suggest the idea to her at all. I just wish Sigma wasn't the sole reason for just about everything that happens in these games.
All that aside, Burkana is among my top 3 when it comes to favorite Mega Man X characters. Sure, she is only in this game and hardly mentioned anywhere else, but she is so unique among other characters in this series. The witch aesthetic works so well with her. Also, she is hot as fuck.
To no one's surprise as well.
Shut it, bombs. At least I'm being honest about my reasons, unlike you two.
One thing I don't like about this game when playing as Zero is that his attacks are much too short. I often find myself taking touch damage too much when I'm trying to attack enemies.
Sleepy Joe, we call that a skill issue.
Gentlemen, please, we've been doing so well so far. Don't break now. This game also has a store that you can use to get upgrades for X and Zero. Heck, you can even buy the armor parts for X instead of looking for the capsules if you want. This is a great way to incorporate such a system if you ask me.
I also think the levels are pretty cool. They're mostly the same levels, but some of them have extra gimmicks that weren't in the original games. It's not much, but it does help some of the monotony. Anyways, all that said, I think the first game should be a D tier while the second is B tier.
Really? I don't think this game does enough to justify B tier. A lot of it is the same stuff we've played before. I think it should go to D tier, maybe even C.
There is no fucking way the second game is on the same level as the first game. The second has so much more going for it in all ways.
Guys, chill out. Let's compromise. It's been a while since I last played these games, so I don't remember the small details. Can we just put the second game in C tier? It does a lot to improve the first game, but it's still retreading content we've seen before.
I can live with C. What about you, Donald?
Fine, whatever.
I'm sorry, Donald, but it is what it is. So what's the last game we have now?
Our last game is a banger. This is Mega Man Maverick Hunter X. This is a remake on the PlayStation Portable, and was supposed to be a reboot for the whole series.
The production values for this game is something else for the series too. Superb voice acting, mostly the same cast that was in X8, with the same roles for the main characters. The gameplay is 3D, but on a 2D plane. It's mostly the same in all counts, minus some differences in level design and power-up locations.
Of course, we all know about the general story of X1. Like Donald said, though, this game was a reboot for the whole series, with some changes to what happens in the story. Sigma still incites a rebellion against the world as usual, but in this game, we are shown the events leading up to the rebellion through an OVA called The Day of Sigma. It's a fantastic OVA animated by Zebek, who are no longer around anymore since 2019. We see X as a B-rank hunter, still learning the ropes for being a maverick hunter, working alongside his best friend Zero. We also see Sigma in his leadership role in much better detail before going maverick.
And the dude is such an ideal leader. Everyone respects him and looks to his guidance.
We also see Chill Penguin and Storm Eagle leading their own companies. Dr. Kane is also here with Sigma, talking with him about X's potential and how it could spearhead Reploid evolution. This is where Sigma starts getting his Darwinism ideas, starts to get too fascinated with X, and eventually turns maverick for his newfound ideals.
We don't want to go full stop into what happens in this animation. If you haven't watched this by chance, it's definitely a must-watch. Anyways, back to the game itself. It's still mostly the first game we know and love, but some things are different about it. Joe said that power-ups got shuffled around. You now find the leg parts with Flame Mammoth, the arm parts with Sting Chameleon, the head parts with Chill Penguin, and the body parts with Storm Eagle.
It's such a good idea to do this. For those familiar with the first game already, this shuffle of power-ups makes the game more fresh and changes the stage order. Most start with Chill Penguin in the old game for the dash upgrade, but now you gotta start with Flame Mammoth instead.
Electric Spark also has a change in his charge attack. Instead of throwing out 2 electric walls on both sides, he now sends out multiple lightning bolts around his body. Some other weapons might have small differences, but they mostly act the same as they were before, if memory serves at least. The Hadouken requires just 1 run of Armored Armadillo's stage, but you must not get hit at all during the stage.
The arm upgrade is also different if you acquire it from Zero in Sigma's Palace. The part from Dr. Light fires off in the usual red spiraling pattern. Zero's specific arm upgrade fires a singular red charge blast, which deals more damage to bosses. I love this small detail.
Also in Sigma's Palace, the boss order is shuffled around too. Every encounter shows them with whited out eyes, as if they were brought back to life with no soul or personality. It brought a new twist to the typical boss rush at the end of these games. Like, Sigma doesn't care about these Reploids as people, but only use them as tools instead.
And let's not forget being able to play as Vile when you beat the game. It's a non-canon playthrough, just a what-if scenario about Vile destroying everyone in his path to prove he is the strongest Reploid of all time. He has 3 weapons on him at all times, 1 in his arms, his turret on his shoulder, and in his knees. You get new weapons when you beat the bosses, which allows you to customize your playstyle. The downsides are that the stage music is all the same track and he doesn't get any armor upgrades like X can. It can be an issue when you get to the end parts of the game.
I love this idea of being able to play as Vile. He feels like an armory with what he has access to. It's too bad this whole mode has that slapped together in a rush kind of feeling.
It seems we have the same wavelength here. So the million-dollar question after all of this is this game better than the classic version? If you want my opinion, the answer is no. That's not to say this game is bad. On the contrary, this game is amazing. It's hard to describe why I think this is the case. The graphics sort of look subpar, I suppose, along with some assets the game uses. I give some leeway because of this being on a portable system, so some cuts had to be made here and there.
I agree with your opinion. This game is a great time, but it just feels like it's missing something. The classic version has a charm that this newer remake doesn't have. It also doesn't help that this reboot started and ended with this game due to poor sales. I bet being on the PlayStation Portable didn't help its chances of success.
That's what makes me the most upset about the things that could have been. This game was the start to something amazing, and you could tell Capcom didn't cut corners on that front. There was an opportunity to fix the story in such a great way. X4 could have gotten such an amazing story out of this chance it possibly had. X5 could have been such a climactic game, with X and Zero facing off, maybe for different and more viable reasons. X6 could have been a more polished game as a whole. As for X7, I don't know, but anything would have been better than that piece of shit.
So are we dropping this in A tier?
With a heavy heart, yes.
Unfortunately, yes.
All right, this time I think we are all done. This was such a fun time to do this list, and I think it looks pretty solid still.
Outside of some placements I think are wrong, I can live with this list. It's not too bad.
I say it looks real good.
All right, everyone. We will catch you people on the next video. I hope everyone has a good day or night ahead of them.